FEMA's authority to seize preps in SHTF scenarios. In times of crisis, the role of government agencies like FEMA becomes crucial in managing disaster response and ensuring public safety. However, there's been debate and concern among preppers and survivalists about FEMA's authority to seize certain preps during emergencies. So I'm going to dispel those rumors by taking a look into the actual legal basis, historical examples, and the types of preps most likely to be targeted by FEMA in SHTF scenarios. So what is the legal basis for FEMA's authority? FEMA's authority to seize private property during emergencies is primarily derived from the Stafford Act, which is the primary federal law governing emergency management and disaster response in the U.S. Under the Stafford Act, FEMA has broad powers to coordinate federal assistance and resources in response to disasters and emergencies. And it's specific to Section 706 of the Stafford Act that grants the President the authority to direct any federal agency to utilize its authorities and the resources granted to it under federal law, including personnel, equipment, supplies, facilities, and managerial, technical, and advisory services during emergencies. Okay. Understanding FEMA's authority under the Stafford Act's legal jargon. The Stafford Act grants FEMA extensive powers to coordinate federal assistance during emergencies, including the utilization of resources granted under that federal law. This broad language encompasses a wide range of resources, including personal property owned by citizens. In essence, FEMA can requisition such resources to support emergency response and recovery efforts, with the goal of ensuring public safety and mitigating the impact of disasters. And I believe this next part is the most important part of this video. It is regarding the legalese of the Stafford Act and how it conflicts with the Fifth Amendment. So, in plain, non-lawyer terms, here you go. The Constitution protects people's right to own property and says the government can't take it without fair payment, as stated in the Fifth Amendment. But during emergencies like natural disasters or crises, the government might need to take property to keep everyone safe, they say. This is called eminent domain. And you may be familiar with this term eminent domain as it's used in other contexts like urban redevelopment projects and infrastructure improvements. Even though the government can do this, it must follow rules and it needs to treat people fairly. This means they need a good reason for taking the property, and they must compensate the owners fairly for what they take. So while the government can take property during emergencies, they have to do it carefully and make sure people are treated fairly. This sometimes can create a conflict with the Fifth Amendment, which protects property rights, but the government argues that the need to protect public safety justifies these actions. Courts may need to decide if the government's actions during emergencies are justified and if property owners are being treated fairly according to the Constitution. That is, if courts are still around after SHTF. Historical examples. While FEMA has not frequently exercised its authority to seize private property, there have been instances in recent history where these actions have occurred. One notable example is during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, where there were reports confirmed of FEMA and other government agencies confiscating firearms from law-abiding citizens in the affected areas. This left these law-abiding citizens vulnerable, as looting and assaults rose astronomically, and these citizens weren't able to defend themselves. In some cases, these firearms were never returned to their owners. Additionally, there have been debates regarding the adequacy of compensation or restitution for seized firearms and other property during emergencies. During the COVID-19 pandemic, there were concerns about government agencies redirecting medical supplies and equipment, including masks and ventilators, to areas with higher needs. What about solar power systems? In an actual true SHTF scenario, where a prolonged and severe disaster significantly disrupts infrastructure and essential services, it is possible for government agencies to consider accessing and utilizing alternative power systems installed on private property, like solar generators or solar power systems. It would obviously depend on a variety of factors like the severity and the duration of the disaster, the availability of alternative energy sources, the necessity of maintaining critical infrastructure or essential services, and the legal and practical constraints associated with accessing and utilizing private property. But in extreme and dire circumstances, where traditional energy sources are scarce or unavailable, alternative power systems installed on private property may become essential for sustaining emergency response and recovery efforts, providing power for critical equipment, communication devices, or medical facilities. Government agencies may invoke emergency powers or requisition authority to access and utilize these resources in the interest of public safety and welfare. Bluntly, just like any other property, eminent domain could be invoked to use your solar panel systems. However, the decision to access and utilize alternative power systems on private property during a long-term disaster would likely be riddled with legal, ethical, and logistical considerations. The PREPs most likely to be seized. Water. Access to clean water is essential during emergencies, and FEMA may prioritize seizing water stockpiles to distribute to areas facing shortages. Weapons. Firearms and other weapons could be targeted under the pretense of maintaining public safety and preventing looting or violence. Food stockpiles. Non-perishable food items and long-term food storage could be seized to provide sustenance to affected populations. Medical supplies. Protective masks, gloves, and other medical supplies may be requisitioned to support healthcare facilities and frontline workers. Generators and fuel. Power generation equipment and fuel reserves might be seized to maintain critical infrastructure or provide electricity to essential services. Communication devices. Radios, ham radios, and other communication devices could be confiscated to facilitate coordination and communication among emergency responders. Well, they are not taking my property without a fight. Boasting about resisting government agencies through force in the face of eminent domain is not only unrealistic, it's also just counterproductive. Engaging in armed confrontation with authorities during eminent domain proceedings is not a viable strategy, and it can lead to severe consequences, including injury, loss of property, and legal repercussions. In the end, such actions are likely to result in the seizure of the PREPs regardless. Instead, preppers should focus on practical strategies to safeguard their PREPs against the power of eminent domain. Diversify PREPs across multiple locations, including off-grid properties, secure storage facilities, or burying caches in different spots. I'm going to link the cool video I did on very creative places to hide your PREPs. You will find it in the description. By spreading out resources, preppers can reduce the risk of losing everything in a single eminent domain seizure. Additionally, investing in camouflage techniques or discrete storage methods can help conceal PREPs from government scrutiny. While you can look into legal options to protect your property rights and challenge unjust eminent domain action, this may not be a possibility, or it at least may be an after-the-fact option. Keeping information about your stockpiles and PREPs confidential is crucial for minimizing the risk of government intervention or unwanted attention, and is really the best first choice. And it's worth noting that certain purchases, like large quantities of dehydrated food, and of certain items like firearms, ammunition, or certain chemicals, may attract attention now from authorities for various reasons. Among them, that there is stockpiling happening. Additionally, in the digital age, consumer data collected by retailers and online platforms can be analyzed and used for various purposes, including targeted advertising, market research, and potentially even profiling individuals based on their purchasing behavior. While there isn't conclusive evidence of widespread surveillance specifically targeting preppers, it's important for people to be aware of their privacy rights and take precautions to protect their personal information and purchasing habits. While FEMA's authority to seize private property during emergencies is legally grounded in the Stafford Act, the extent and the circumstances of these actions remain subject to interpretation and debate. Preppers and survivalists should be aware of the potential for government intervention in times of crisis and take necessary precautions to safeguard their preps. Understanding FEMA's authority, historical precedents, and the types of preps most likely to be seized can inform strategic planning and preparedness efforts in anticipation of SHTF scenarios. All right, once again, this was a lot of information I just shared with you. I hope that this helped clear up any confusion about what can and cannot be done legally and gave you some ideas on protecting your property without resorting to the Custer's last stand idea. So let me know your thoughts in the comments.